It was almost midnight on a lonely highway near Austin, Texas. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the road into a mirror of shining lights. Most people were already home, safe and dry. But Ethan Miller, a 28-year-old auto mechanic, was still behind the wheel of his old pickup truck, heading back from a late shift at the repair shop. He rubbed his tired eyes and turned up the heater. The sound of the rain against the windshield was steady, almost calming. Ethan thought about his younger sister, Lily, who was waiting at home. She had been sick for weeks, but she always stayed up until he returned. He smiled softly thinking about her favorite soup still sitting on the stove. But then something caught his eye. Through the heavy rain, a strange orange glow appeared far ahead on the road. At first, Ethan thought it was just a reflection of streetlights, but as he got closer, the light grew brighter, and smoke began to rise. His heart started to pound. He slowed down the truck, and that's when he saw a car was on fire near the side of the road. Flames were bursting out from under the hood, licking the night sky. The front of the car was completely crushed, probably from a crash. Without thinking twice, Ethan slammed the brakes and jumped out into the rain. The cold wind hit his face, but the heat from the fire was even stronger. He shouted, "Hello? Is anyone in there?" No answer. He ran closer, shielding his face with his jacket. Through the cracked windshield, he saw a man inside, slumped over the steering wheel not moving. Ethan's hands trembled. He looked around, no one else was there, no other cars, no help in sight. Just him, the fire, and the trapped man. He pulled his jacket over his mouth and rushed forward. The door handle was burning hot. He pulled once, twice, nothing. It wouldn't budge. Flames roared louder, and a small explosion under the hood made him stumble back. "Come on. Hold on, man," he yelled, coughing from the smoke. Ethan spotted a metal rod lying on the road, maybe from the crash. He grabbed it, jammed it into the doorframe, and pulled with all his strength. The metal screeched, the frame bent, and finally, the door snapped open. Inside, the man was unconscious, a middle-aged guy wearing a business suit, his face covered in blood and soot. The smell of gasoline filled the air. Ethan leaned in, unbuckled the seat belt, and tried to drag him out. The man was heavy, his legs stuck near the pedals. The flames were now licking the dashboard. Ethan gritted his teeth, pulled harder, his arms shaking, his throat burning from the smoke. Finally, the man came loose. Ethan grabbed him under the arms and dragged him away from the burning car, step by step, until they were 20 feet away. And then the car exploded behind them. The blast threw Ethan and the man to the ground. Rain and fire mixed in the air, and pieces of metal scattered everywhere. Ethan coughed, covering the stranger with his jacket. For a moment, everything went silent, just the rain falling on broken glass. Ethan looked at the man. He was alive, breathing weakly, his pulse faint but steady. Ethan sighed with relief. "Hey, you're safe now," he whispered. "You're gonna be okay." Ethan stayed there until he saw headlights approaching. Another driver stopped, shocked by the fire. Ethan waved his arms and shouted, "Call an ambulance. Hurry." The stranger was taken to the hospital, still unconscious. Ethan gave the paramedics all the information he knew, which wasn't much. They asked for his name, but he just shook his head. "I'm just glad he's alive," Ethan said quietly. Then, before anyone could ask more questions, he got back in his old truck and drove away into the rainy night. Hours later, in the emergency room, the man finally opened his eyes. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive just a few more minutes, and he would have burned with the car. His name was Ryan Carter, a 35-year-old marketing executive from Dallas. He had been driving back from a business trip when he fell asleep at the wheel. Ryan looked around, confused. "Where's the man who pulled me out?" he asked. The nurse smiled softly. He didn't give his name. Just said you were safe. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't believe a stranger had risked his life to save him and then disappeared without a trace. That night, as he lay in the hospital bed, Ryan made himself a promise. I will find him. Someday, somehow. I'll find the man who saved my life. But miles away, Ethan was sitting quietly on his porch, drinking black coffee, staring at the rain. He didn't tell Lily what happened. To him, it wasn't something special. He just whispered to himself. Anyone would have done the same. Yet deep down, he didn't know that single act of courage would come back to him in a way he could never imagine. Days turned into weeks after the night of the fire. For Ethan Miller, life went back to normal, or at least, it looked that way. He was back in his small repair shop on the edge of Austin, fixing engines, changing tires, and greeting customers with his quiet smile. But sometimes, when the shop got quiet and the smell of gasoline filled the air, he would remember the sound of that explosion, the burning car, the stranger's face, the rain washing away the smoke. He didn't talk about it to anyone. Not even to Lily, his younger sister. Lily was 21, studying part-time and working at a diner to help pay the bills. She had a gentle heart and a weak body, always catching colds, always trying to hide her cough so Ethan wouldn't worry. Every night, when Ethan came home, she'd greet him with a smile and ask, "How was your day, Ethan?" And he would always answer, "Same old, just cars and grease." But deep down, he knew something inside him had changed. On the other side, Ryan Carter was still recovering in a Dallas hospital. His ribs had healed, and his face no longer showed the burns. But his mind wasn't at peace. He couldn't stop thinking about the man who saved him. He remembered flashes, rain, smoke, strong hands pulling him out, a rough voice shouting, "Hold on, man." Then, darkness. Ryan searched everywhere. He called the police station, the fire department, even local news channels. But there was no record, no name. The paramedics said the rescuer left before they could ask. Ryan felt restless. "He saved my life," he told his assistant one morning, "and I don't even know who he is." His assistant smiled politely, maybe he didn't want to be found. But Ryan shook his head. No. People like that deserve to be found. Ethan's struggle. Back in Austin, Ethan's days grew harder. Business at the shop slowed down. A new auto center opened nearby with flashy advertisements and free car washes. Customers started going there instead. To make things worse, the shop's landlord raised the rent. Ethan worked longer hours just to keep the doors open. Then one evening, he came home and found Lily sitting on the couch, pale and weak. She tried to smile, but her hands were shaking. He rushed to her side. "Lily, what happened?" She whispered, "Just dizzy. I skipped lunch." But later, after she fell asleep, Ethan saw the medical bills on the kitchen table, unpaid and growing. His chest tightened. He didn't have enough to cover them. That night, he stood outside under the streetlight, staring at the sky. The memory of saving that stranger came back again. He thought, "At least I did one good thing in this world." He didn't know that the man he saved was still out there, searching for him. Ryan's determination. A few months later, Ryan had almost given up hope. He had looked through hundreds of names, hospital lists, even local newspapers from the night of the fire. Then one morning, while scrolling through a small-town news blog, he found a short post. Local mechanic helps firefighters rescue car crash victim. The post had no names, but it mentioned a small auto shop outside Austin. Ryan's heart raced. It was a thin lead, but it was something. He took the day off, got in his car, and drove 2 hours to Austin. He stopped at every auto shop he could find, asking the same question. "Did one of your guys help a man from a burning car a few months ago?" Most people shook their heads. But one old man at a gas station said, "You might wanna check Miller Auto Repairs down the road. That kid's got a brave heart." Ryan thanked him and drove there right away. A missed moment. When Ryan reached Miller Auto Repairs, the small shop was open but empty. Tools were scattered around, the radio was playing softly, and a single light bulb flickered above the workbench. Ethan had stepped out to buy parts. Ryan looked around. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. His eyes fell on a photo pinned to the wall, a young man and a girl smiling in front of an old pickup truck. The name under the photo said Ethan and Lily. Ryan felt his heart stop for a second. He finally had a name. But before he could wait or leave a note, his phone rang. It was an emergency call from his office, a major deal falling apart. He hesitated for a moment, then left, promising himself to come back. He didn't know it would take a whole year before their paths crossed again. A storm ahead. Meanwhile, Ethan's luck only got worse. The shop barely made enough to pay rent, and Lily's health kept declining. He sold his tools one by one just to buy her medicine. Sometimes, while driving his truck at night, he'd pass that same stretch of highway, the one where he pulled a stranger from fire. He'd slow down, look at the spot, and whisper, "Hope you're doing okay, whoever you are." He had no idea that somewhere in Dallas, the same man was thinking the exact same thing. A full year passed since the night of the fire. Life had become heavier for Ethan Miller. His small auto shop was still running, but just barely. He worked 12 hours a day, fixing cars with tired hands, his shirt stained with oil and sweat. Every evening, he would come home to his little sister, Lily, who was fighting her illness with a brave smile. Some days, she would greet him at the door with her soft voice. "You smell like gas again, Ethan." He would laugh and reply, "That's the smell of hard work, kiddo." But inside, he was breaking. The medical bills were growing faster than he could pay. He had already sold most of his tools, even his old truck's spare parts. Still, it wasn't enough. Sometimes, he skipped meals so Lily could have more. Sometimes, he stayed up late at the kitchen table, staring at the unpaid bills, whispering, "I'll figure it out. I always do." But life had other plans. The long night. It was a cold, windy night in Austin, Texas. The sky was dark and heavy with clouds. Ethan had just finished his last repair job of the day and was driving home in his old pickup truck. The road was quiet, the same highway where, a year ago, he had pulled a man from a burning car. As he drove, his eyes began to blur. He hadn't eaten properly in 2 days, and his body felt weak. But his mind was full of worry about rent, medicine, and Lily's next hospital visit. Suddenly, bright lights flashed in his mirror. A speeding delivery truck was coming fast from behind, swerving dangerously in the rain. Ethan tried to move to the side, but before he could react, crash. The impact was brutal. Ethan's truck spun across the wet road, hit the guardrail, and flipped over. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. Then, silence. The world went dark. At the hospital. Hours later, Ethan woke up to the sound of machines beeping. His vision was blurry, and his body felt like it was made of lead. Pain shot through his ribs and legs. A nurse leaned over him. "You're in St. Mary's Hospital, sir. You've been in an accident. Try not to move." Ethan blinked, his voice weak. "Lily, where's Lily?" The nurse smiled softly. "Your sister is outside. She's safe." When Lily came in, her eyes were swollen from crying. She held Ethan's hand tightly and whispered, "You scared me, Ethan. I thought I lost you." He tried to smile, but it hurt to breathe. The doctor entered and explained that Ethan had broken 2 ribs and suffered internal injuries. Surgery was needed soon. Lily's heart sank when she heard the cost. It was more than they could ever afford. That night, she sat alone in the waiting room, praying. The rain outside tapped softly on the glass, just like it had on the night her brother saved that stranger. A stranger returns. The next morning, the hospital staff gathered around the front desk, whispering. One nurse said, "There's a man who just came in, says he wants to pay for a patient's surgery in full." Another asked, "Which patient?" The nurse pointed toward the intensive care list. "Ethan Miller." Moments later, a tall man in a gray coat walked down the hallway. His face was calm, but his eyes were full of emotion. It was Ryan Carter, the man Ethan had saved from the burning car 1 year ago. Ryan had finally tracked him down. He had returned to the auto shop earlier that week, hoping to meet Ethan, only to find it closed with a "for rent" sign. When he asked around, a neighbor told him about the accident. Ryan couldn't believe it. The man who once saved his life was now lying in a hospital bed fighting for his own. Without hesitation, he went straight to the hospital office and said, "Whatever it costs, I'll pay for everything. Surgery, recovery, everything." Fate comes full circle. Lily didn't know who he was. When the nurse told her about the stranger who paid the bills, she looked confused. "Who would do something like that for us?" she asked. The nurse nodded toward the waiting area. "He's right there." Lily turned and saw Ryan sitting quietly near the window, his coat damp from the rain. He stood up and smiled gently. "Are you Lily?" he asked. "Yes, and you are?" Ryan took a deep breath. "My name is Ryan Carter. Your brother saved my life a year ago. I was trapped in a burning car. He pulled me out before it exploded." Lily gasped. "You're that man?" Ryan nodded slowly. "Yes. I've been searching for him ever since. And now, it's my turn to save him." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth, whispering, thank you so much." Ryan smiled softly. "Don't thank me yet. Just pray he wakes up." The operation. The surgery lasted for hours. Ryan stayed in the hallway the entire time, pacing nervously, his hands trembling. Every time a doctor walked by, he looked up in hope. Finally, the surgeon came out and said, "He's going to be fine. It was close, but he's strong." Ryan closed his eyes and sighed in relief. Lily cried quietly, thanking God and the man she now knew was more than just a stranger. The awakening. 2 days later, Ethan opened his eyes. The room was quiet, sunlight slipping through the blinds. His body felt weak, but the pain had faded a little. He turned his head and saw a familiar face sitting beside him, Ryan Carter, smiling softly. For a moment, Ethan thought he was dreaming. Then Ryan said in a calm voice, "Looks like it's my turn to return the favor." Ethan's eyes widened. It's you." Ryan nodded. "Yeah. You saved me that night on the highway. Now it was my chance to save you." Ethan stared at him for a long moment, too shocked to speak. Then, with a faint smile, he whispered, "Guess the world really does go in circles." When Ethan Miller woke up in the hospital, it felt like waking from a long dream or maybe a nightmare. His body ached, his ribs were bandaged, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. For a few seconds, he didn't remember what had happened. Then flashes came back: headlights, the crash, the sound of metal twisting. He tried to move, but pain shot through his side. Then he heard a calm voice say, "Hey, easy, you're safe now." Ethan turned his head and saw Ryan Carter, sitting in a chair beside the bed, looking tired but relieved. For a moment, Ethan thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. You're the guy from the car," he said weakly. Ryan smiled and nodded. "Yeah. That night, you pulled me out of the fire. You saved my life. And now it's my turn." Ethan blinked, trying to take it all in. You, you found me. Ryan chuckled softly. Took me a whole year. I almost gave up. But I guess fate doesn't like unfinished business. A debt of the heart. Over the next few days, Ryan visited Ethan every morning. He brought breakfast, paid the bills, and made sure Lily had everything she needed. Ethan was overwhelmed. He had never met someone like Ryan, rich, successful, and yet so humble. He couldn't understand why a man like him would go this far. One afternoon, when the room was quiet, Ethan finally asked, "Why are you doing all this? You don't owe me anything." Ryan smiled, looking out the window. "You're wrong. I owe you my life. That night, you could have driven away. You didn't. You ran into fire for a man you didn't know. You taught me something that night, that there's still real kindness left in this world." Ethan looked down, embarrassed. "I just did what anyone would do." Ryan shook his head. "No. Most people wouldn't." Lily's gratitude. Lily adored Ryan. She brought him coffee every morning and called him the miracle man. Ryan, in turn, treated her like a little sister. He made sure she got the best doctors for her condition, quietly paying for her treatment too, though she didn't know it at first. One evening, Lily asked him, "Do you believe everything happens for a reason?" Ryan smiled. "I didn't, before. But after meeting your brother, I think I do now." A promise reborn. When Ethan was finally strong enough to walk, Ryan came to visit with a small smile. "Come on," he said, handing him a jacket. "I'm taking you somewhere." Ethan frowned. "Where?" Ryan grinned. "Just trust me." They drove out of the city, into the countryside, until Ryan stopped the car in front of a new building. It was clean, bright, and surrounded by cars all neatly lined up. Ethan looked confused. "What is this place?" Ryan turned to him. "It's yours, well, ours. A new auto repair center. I bought it, but I want you to run it. You'll have full control." Ethan stared at him in disbelief. "You're kidding." "No," Ryan said softly. "You saved a stranger's life, Ethan. Now it's time to rebuild yours." For the first time in years, Ethan felt hope returning, real, solid hope. His throat tightened as he whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." Ryan smiled. "You already did. You gave me my second chance. I'm just giving it back. The gift of kindness." Over the next few months, Ethan's new repair shop flourished. His honesty and hard work drew customers quickly. Lily managed the front desk, her health improving day by day. Ryan often dropped by, sometimes in a suit straight from work, sometimes just to have coffee and talk. The two men became close friends, almost like brothers. One afternoon, Ryan leaned against a car and said, "You know, when I crashed that night, I thought my life was over. But because of you, I got to start again. You changed my view of the world." Ethan laughed softly. "And because of you, I still have a roof over my head." They both laughed, but behind that laughter was something deeper: mutual respect, gratitude, and a shared understanding of fate. The truth comes out. A few weeks later, Lily accidentally discovered the hospital receipt with Ryan's signature. She realized he had paid not just for Ethan's surgery, but also for her medical treatment. She confronted him gently one afternoon. "Ryan, why didn't you tell us?" He smiled kindly. "Because gratitude shouldn't come with pressure. You two deserve peace, not debt." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "You're the kindest person I've ever met." Ryan shook his head. "No. Your brother is. I'm just following his example." Peace at last. As the sun set behind the hills, Ethan and Ryan sat outside the shop one evening, watching Lily water the small garden near the entrance. The world felt calm again. The pain, the fire, the hospital, all of it now just memories. Ethan looked at Ryan and said quietly. Funny, isn't it? One night can change two lives forever. Ryan smiled. That's what I keep telling people. You never know when kindness will come back to you. They both sat in silence, watching the golden sky fade into dusk. A year had passed since Ethan Miller's accident. Life finally felt calm, peaceful in a way he hadn't known for years. The new Miller and Carter auto repair shop had become one of the most trusted in Austin, Texas. Customers came not just for the service, but for the feeling, the honesty, the warmth. Ethan, now stronger than ever, worked with a smile every day. His limp from the accident was still there, but it didn't slow him down. His sister, Lily, handled the front desk, laughing with customers and making coffee for everyone who walked in. And Ryan Carter, the once busy executive from Dallas, visited every weekend. He had turned from a client into a partner, and from a partner into family. Two friends, one purpose. One Saturday morning, Ryan arrived early at the shop with two coffees in hand. Ethan was already working under a car, covered in grease as usual. Ryan chuckled. You know, you could hire someone for that now. You're the boss. Ethan slid out, smiling. I'll never stop getting my hands dirty. It reminds me where I came from. Ryan handed him a coffee. And where you're going. Ethan took a sip and said softly, forward, always forward. They both laughed, but in their eyes was something deeper, a quiet understanding that life had taken them through fire just to bring them here. Lily's surprise. That evening, Lily gathered both men in the shop office. On the wall hung a new wooden sign she had made herself. It read, "Kindness is never lost. It always finds its way back." Ethan smiled. That's beautiful. Ryan looked at her with pride. You're right, Lily. It really does come back sometimes when you least expect it. Lily grinned. You two proved that. They all laughed, but their eyes said what words couldn't. Helping another stranger. A few weeks later, a young man named Jason, about 19 years old, came into the shop. His clothes were dirty, and his hands were trembling. My car broke down, he said softly. But I don't have money to fix it. I just needed to get to work. I'll pay you later, I promise. Ethan looked at Ryan, then back at the boy. He smiled and said, Don't worry about it. We'll fix it. No charge. Jason's eyes widened. Really? But why? Ryan patted him on the shoulder and said. Because someone once helped us when we needed it most. Jason's eyes filled with tears. He whispered, Thank you, sir. I won't forget this. When the boy drove away later that day, Ethan leaned on the counter and said quietly. Feels good, doesn't it? Ryan nodded. It's like passing the torch, one act of kindness at a time. The dream home. Months later, Ethan surprised Lily with a visit to a quiet street on the outskirts of town. A small, cozy house stood there, white walls, blue roof, and a front porch with wind chimes that sang in the breeze. Lily looked around, confused. Whose house is this? Ethan smiled and handed her a small silver key. Ours. Lily gasped. Ethan, no way. How did you? Ryan stepped forward, smiling. We all worked for it. You deserve a home where you can finally rest. Lily hugged them both, tears streaming down her face. You guys, you changed my whole life. Ethan looked at her gently. No, Lil. Kindness changed ours. Full circle. One rainy evening, almost 2 years after the first fire, Ryan and Ethan stood outside the shop, watching the rain hit the ground just like that night long ago. Ryan said quietly, You know, I still remember the sound of that explosion. The moment everything went black. Ethan nodded. And I remember running into those flames. I didn't know your name, your story. I just knew I couldn't leave someone behind. Ryan smiled. You didn't just save my life, Ethan. You saved who I was. You reminded me to care again. Ethan chuckled. Guess we saved each other, huh? They both stood there, listening to the rain, feeling the same quiet peace they had been searching for all along. The message. Months later, a local news channel visited the shop to do a feature story about the mechanic and the man he saved. When the reporter asked Ethan what he learned from all of it, he looked at the camera and said, kindness doesn't need a reason. Sometimes it's just about being there when someone needs help, even if they're a stranger. Because one day, that kindness might come back when you need it most. Ryan added softly. We live in a world that forgets too quickly. But stories like ours remind people good still exists. The interview went viral online, touching millions of hearts. People began calling their shop the Hope Garage. A peaceful ending. One sunny afternoon, Ethan sat on the porch of their new house, sipping coffee. Lily was planting flowers, and Ryan was fixing the mailbox that kept leaning sideways. Ethan looked at them and smiled. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be. But it was good. It was peaceful. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the laughter, the birds, and the wind chimes. And he whispered to himself. Kindness always comes back, you just have to believe. The camera would fade out on that moment. 3 lives forever changed because one man stopped his truck on a rainy night and decided to help a stranger. The end. Final message on screen for your viewers. One simple act of kindness can change a life, maybe even save one. Never stop being the reason someone believes in good people.